He never believed in love at first sound until the day he dialed that number. It was just another Monday, the kind that drags itself across the calendar with a lethargy that seems to seep into your bones. He was frustrated. His internet had gone down again, and the world had conspired to make him feel small and powerless. He called the customer service hotline without expecting anything more than a polite annoyance and a line of excuses. But then, she spoke. Her voice was calm, effortless, and somehow warm, as if it had been designed to slip past your defenses and settle quietly in your chest. He felt an unexplainable pull, a gentle tug on something he didn't even know existed. He didn't just hear the words, he felt them. He lingered on every syllable, memorizing the cadence, the inflections, the tiny pauses that felt like breaths meant just for him. And then he laughed at himself, because what was he doing? Falling in love with a stranger who might not even exist beyond this digital void? Yet, he couldn't hang up. Every line she delivered, every solution she offered to his trivial problem, seemed coded in something more than professional patience. It was a hidden melody, an invitation, a secret handshake to a world he wanted to enter. He tried to rationalize it. It was a job, he told himself. A script, a recording, maybe even a robot with a really good AI. But when he asked a question off-script, the warmth in her laugh, the tiny flicker of amusement, confirmed what he didn't want to admit. She was real, and he was hopelessly drawn. He started calling every day, not because his internet kept failing, but because he needed to hear that voice again. Sometimes it was morning, sometimes late at night, but each call became a ritual, a heartbeat that punctuated his otherwise monotonous life. He began to notice patterns. Her voice was patient with mistakes, but tinged with a spark of humor when he asked absurd questions. She had a laugh that was soft but infectious, and he swore he could tell when she was smiling through the line. The world outside his apartment became secondary. It was her voice that tethered him to some fragile thread of hope and exhilaration. He told no one, afraid of sounding ridiculous. Friends had suggested therapy, suggested distractions, suggested hobbies. He considered it, but the idea of replacing that voice with anything else felt impossible. Every night, he replayed her words in his mind, dissecting the tone, the cadence, trying to imagine what she looked like, who she really was, and if she knew she had claimed something indefinable in him. He began leaving subtle clues in his conversation, hints that he hoped would lead her to him somehow. Without realizing that this was already the beginning of an obsession he could not untangle. Days turned into weeks, and he noticed things that others would dismiss. The time she logged in, the way her tone shifted when he mentioned something personal, the strange coincidences when she seemed almost too attuned to his moods. One evening, he broke his own rule and asked the unthinkable, could someone like you ever? He trailed off. Ashamed of the foolishness, she laughed, that same soft laugh, and said, "Sometimes I wonder if people notice me outside these calls." It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. But it was enough. He hung up that night, feeling both closer and farther than ever, a paradox that gnawed at him. The next step became inevitable. He wanted to find her, to connect the voice to a human face, to see if the warmth he felt was real or just a beautiful illusion. He started with everything he could gather: call logs, scripts, online forums, hints from customer reviews. Every detail she let slip, favorite coffee, background noise, small jokes, became a breadcrumb in the labyrinth he was determined to navigate. He knew it was borderline obsessive, and part of him feared what he might uncover, but another part could not resist the pull. He became a phantom in her world, a silent observer tracking patterns, piecing together her schedule like a detective obsessed with a case that had no criminal but a heart to capture. Weeks passed, and he realized how delicate the dance had become. One misstep, and he could ruin everything. He had to move carefully, ethically, like a shadow that wanted to be seen, but could not be noticed. Then came the breakthrough, almost imperceptible at first. A slight accent, a fleeting reference to a local landmark, this, a mention of a neighborhood coffee shop he had visited once in passing. Each was a puzzle piece he did not know he had been waiting for, each promising the tantalizing chance of finally closing the gap between the voice and the person. He started frequenting the places she had mentioned online in passing, pretending coincidence guided him, though in reality, every step was calculated, each movement designed to brush past destiny without alarming it. Days turned into nights, nights into obsessive planning. He started imagining what it would be like to see her, to hear her laugh in person, to see if the spark was something physical, something in her eyes, or if it had always been in him. The obsession didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable, a force larger than himself, a gravitational pull he could not escape. Finally, the day came when he spotted her, entirely by accident, or perhaps fate, he liked to tell himself. She was in line at a coffee shop, headphones in, utterly absorbed in her own world, unaware that someone had spent weeks mapping her existence from miles away. He froze, heart hammering, unable to breathe. She looked different, smaller, human, flawed, yet perfect in ways he could not have imagined. And in that moment, all the meticulous planning, all the obsession, all the longing distilled into a single breathtaking truth. She was real. Not a voice anymore, but a person. He wanted to run, to yell, to introduce himself, but his legs refused. All he could do was watch, memorizing the curve of her smile, the rhythm of her gestures, the way her fingers danced over the cup in her hands. And then, as if sensing something, her head lifted, eyes scanning the room. Their gaze collided. Time fractured. In that brief instant, the walls between reality and fantasy dissolved, and he realized the absurdity of love carried entirely in sound. It had to be more than a voice. It had to be presence, touch, shared air. She smiled knowingly, the corners of her lips twitching as though she recognized the devotion, the invisible threads he had woven over endless nights of longing. He swallowed his fear, stepped forward, and for the first time addressed her without the safety of a phone line, without scripts, without anonymity. "Hi," he said, voice trembling but honest. "I think I've been in love with your voice for a long time." She laughed, soft but real, and it was nothing like he had imagined, yet everything he had hoped for. "I think I've been waiting for you to say that," she replied, and in her eyes, he saw a mirror of every late-night conversation, every imagined interaction, every echo of longing that had driven him to this moment. He realized then that love, even in its most strange and improbable forms, required courage. The courage to step out from behind the illusion, to meet reality fully and unguardedly. And when their hands met for the first time, a simple, grounding touch that confirmed everything he had believed in his heart, he understood that the voice had been the beginning, but the story, the real story, was only starting. No scripts, no rehearsals, just two humans, imperfect and alive, stepping into the same world together. And in that realization, he found a clarity that had eluded him for so long. Love could begin in the strangest ways, even on a customer service hotline, but it could only flourish when met with bravery, honesty, and presence. He smiled, she smiled, and for the first time, the voice and the person became one, not in fantasy, not in longing, but in a tangible, irrevocable moment of reality, where every whispered word, every pause, every laugh was no longer something he memorized, but something he lived with her. And in that, he understood that some of the most extraordinary stories start quietly, in places no one imagines. And yet, when pursued with all the courage one can muster, they bloom into a reality that is even more astonishing than any imagined dream.